Hello everybody, this is Sarah here with the Puget Sound Estuarium. Today I'm going to be feeding the smaller friends we have here in our eelgrass tank, kind of our small omnivores. So we have some dock shrimp and shore crabs that we'll be feeding. So let's see if we can get them to make an appearance, a little bit of food. Today they are getting some mysis shrimp, which are a small variety of planktonic shrimp. And well, this food is actually on the bigger side for our plumose enemies. You might see our plumose over on the right-hand side grab some food as well when it brushes up against their tentacles. Mostly we're going to have a lot of very excited dock shrimp scurrying about. So, dock shrimp, and like most of their decapod relatives, actually kind of have two sets of limbs. So they'll have their walking legs, which you'll see them use to crawl around on the surface. They also have some very small kind of like pincer claws on a couple of their forelimbs that they use to grab and manipulate food, like they're doing now. The way they are getting up in the air to go grab the thing is with their swimmerettes, which are like kind of small paddle-like legs you see under kind of their tail. Towards the back. You can actually tell the sex of shrimp if you can get a good look at their first pair of swimmerettes. On males, it's much stiffer and more obvious, and on females, they're kind of all of them are kind of more soft and paddle-like. Getting them to cooperate to get a look at them, though, can be pretty tricky. So I'll just be giving them more food in different chunks as I watch them eat. If you have any questions about them or any of our other friends we have in this tank or about the Puget Sound in general, just let me know. Yes, you might see them be a little bit squabbly with each other. That's pretty natural and normal behavior for lots of kind of underwater marine species that we have here. Finding food in the ocean can be pretty tricky. Lots of things live in sounds like the Puget Sound here because there's a lot more food and productivity, more algae like you can see growing on our eelgrass over here, and that in kind of the shallow waters. But even in the Puget Sound, finding like good sources of meat or protein can be pretty tricky, so when you find a good chunk, you'll often find it with lots and lots of your friends and have to share or squabble so you can get a kind of place at whatever the big meal might be. And so that's just a normal part of their behavior to kind of pick at each other, crawl all over each other as they're eating. The dock shrimp do pretty much run this tank though. You might see darting in and out from some of the rocks some small shore crabs as well, like I mentioned before, but they pretty much concede ground to the faster, better swimming dock shrimp. The dock shrimp are also bigger than them, so they take to hiding and do a good job cleaning up after them, but the dock shrimp kind of run the show. You can also see over to the side here, we have our lovely, on the right hand side, our ochre sea star there. This is not food meant for them, but they can smell kind of the protein in the water, which makes them pretty excited. So you'll see him start raising up his legs and sticking out all those 2 feet, which he uses to smell as he goes on the hunt as well. But he was fed not too long ago, so he doesn't need any of this food, and will get fed again in another couple of days. And again, if you have any questions about our dock shrimps or other friends, or about any critters you might find in the Puget Sound, just let me know in the comments. This guy right over here, for the white stock, that is a plumose anemone. So they're one of our most common varieties of anemone we have in the Puget Sound. There's two varieties of them. This is the larger variety. In the wild, with enough time, plumose anemones like that guy can get about hip height on an adult human, and weigh more than a 3-year-old child. So this one's still got some potential growing to do. Well, this guy has been grabbing some of the mysid shrimp, which we put in the water for our bigger dock shrimp. They actually like really, really small food, even when they're as big as they can get. They focus on feeding on very small plankton with their kind of small feathery tentacles. So for reproduction on our plumose anemones, they have a few different ways they can reproduce. They can reproduce asexually by splitting in half. So they'll basically kind of walk away from each other. So one half will walk one way, one half will walk the other, and they'll kind of split themselves in half and slowly form kind of a new wall in between them. They also might do that due to damage if one of them is like extremely kind of cut up from the current or something attacking it or something like that. They may also choose to split in half and kind of heal whatever damage they had by becoming two organisms. For them to do that successfully or want to just do that, they generally need to be in a pretty good state reproductive-wise. That's different from some anemones or a lot of corals that'll reproduce asexually in times of stress by similar means. But they do also do sexual reproduction by spawning. So generally in the summer months, based off certain cues, like where we are in the moon phase, how much daylight they're getting, what the temperature of the water is. Some of them will throw eggs out into the water, and some of them will throw sperm out into the water in what's known as broadcast spawning. The eggs and sperm will meet in the water and form little larval forms of our anemones, which are relatives of jellyfish or jellies. And so actually their little larval form, which is so tiny you can't really see with the naked eye, actually looks a lot like a jellyfish. And so the current will carry that little tiny jellyfish larval stage of our anemone to some new location where it will eventually settle and turn into a polyp adult, which is kind of this upside down jellyfish where the tentacles are at the top and it's got a little suction cup. So both asexual and sexual reproduction are what our plumose anemones do. And our ochre sea star off to the right is making pretty good progress up top. So yes, our plumose anemones in our Thunderdome tank, our largest one, have broadcast spawn before. And we did get some tiny little baby anemones out of result of that over time. It is very cool and neat that they did that, and shows that they are in very good health, that they had the energy to put all of those calories that they could have been putting into just growth, into making sperms and egg. But it is also a lot of work to clean up in tanks. When they spawn out, lots and lots of those sperm and eggs don't successfully turn into adults. That's just kind of the nature of them. Unlike us, who puts a lot of effort into our young when we have them, our anemones and lots of our other marine creatures do exactly the opposite end of the spectrum, and just go to try and have as many possible offspring as they can at once. And a lot of them don't survive, which just makes a lot of food and other stuff for other critters. But in an aquarium or a tank where our systems are kind of closed, obviously they're not as big as the actual Puget Sound is. There's a lot of cleanup involved in kind of removing all of the ones that don't happen to be successful to make plenty of room and good, healthy, quality water for all the ones that do survive. Okay, we're going to give them about 5 more minutes to finish cleaning up most of the obvious stuff in the tanks, and then we'll wrap up for the afternoon. They will doubtlessly spend the rest of the entire afternoon carefully and meticulously picking every last little bit of scrap of food that they can find in here. But we'll give it 5 more minutes. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask now. We will also still be answering questions in the comments after we wrap up the stream. The guy just on camera to the left is currently grooming his front legs and his antenna, just to make sure they're nice and clean now that he's been eating. Cleanliness is very important to many creatures in the ocean too, especially shrimp. We don't have the exact same species that live in certain coral reefs that clean, for instance, sharks' mouths and all that stuff. Dock shrimp will volunteer to clean other animals if given the opportunity. When we've had some living with our larger kelp crab before, they have cleaned the kelp crab's claws for them on occasion. So they're very helpful like that. But they're also meticulous in their own personal grooming and hygiene. Alright, that's going to be the end of our stream today. I hope you all enjoyed watching our dock shrimp have their Saturday meal. If you have any questions about them or any of the other critters in this tank or the Puget Sound, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll get to them as soon as I see them over the next few days. Thank you so much for joining us. I recommend liking and following our Facebook page if you are interested in this and other information about the Puget Sound and the environment. Have a great afternoon.